Hello and welcome to Oakville Matters. Today, I'm joined by Councillor Tom Adams and Councillor Beth Robertson. Councillor Robertson represents the southwest part of Oakville. Councillor Adams represents the northeast part of Oakville. Now, of course, in our system in Oakville, there's a duo for each section, each of the 7 sections of town. But here's what we have today. So Beth and Tom, I guess the way we could start off, and maybe we'll surprise Tom a little bit if we do this, nothing says we're getting closer to full recovery or more recovery than discovering that the animating concern anywhere in town is ditches and beavers. So, so Tom, tell us about the beavers and the ditches.
Well, it's a little, I hope it's a distraction from the serious business of dealing with COVID-19, but we are hearing other normal things that I would describe as normal activities of the town of Oakville, including things like beavers taking up residence in our stormwater management ponds, people getting out and trying to do work around their ditches and their front lawns, and trying to figure out what's allowed and not allowed or in front of their ditches in front of their homes. And so those kinds of things are coming up just as regular business, and we at the town of Oakville are responding to those issues just as we normally would, as best we can under the circumstances, even though so many of our part-time staff have been laid off and we don't have our summer students in place yet. So there's a whole bunch of things that we're continuing to do, even though we're responding to the emergency that we're facing.
All right. Well, Beth, what kind of beavers and ditch issues do you have in your part of town?
I can't say we have beavers and ditch, although we have some great forts in Lakeshore Woods. The kids and their dads have been building amazing forts that kids all have a little peek into as they walk through the different creek path woods, and so it's great.
Well, you know, near my house, we have a set of woods that year in and year out, you know, through the generations that we've lived here, the kids build BMX jumps and ramps on and beside the trails that run through the woods and the creeks. So I guess industrious beaver-like kids are beavering away in the woods, yeah. I guess.
That's exactly, that's happening all over town, I believe, and more so than in other years. When we've got so many people using our trails as their only means of recreation.
Well, now your kids are the right age to be out doing that, Tom. Are you? Do you know where your kids are?
I know exactly where my kids are. Like so many other parents, they're endeavoring to go through homeschooling, and mom and dad are busy working at helping them along as best we can, just like all the other parents in town. And it's a very challenging thing. I know how challenging that is. So. I feel for every parent out there.
So are you saying that you and your wife are looking forward to some kind of restoration of classroom education?
We certainly believe that there could be better classroom supports out there. I think a lot of parents feel this way as well. Even if we can't get back into a classroom setting, I think there's a lot more that could be done in terms of the online supports. And the creation of better online curriculum, particularly I think for those who are not yet in the high school curriculum, where there are some online courses that have been running for high school students for a number of years. I don't think that's been the case for those who are in grade 8 and below, and that's a new world, I think, for a lot of kids and a lot of parents to try and figure out how that works.
Yeah, you know, for every 10 parent who complains to me about how bad the online learning has been, I will run into one who thinks it's been terrific. So maybe there's hope in those numbers, as in it'll get better, or you know, where it's not good enough, it will become better. The top question I get is I keep getting demands that I make mask wearing mandatory, and have you been hearing anything like that?
We certainly, I think we're hearing that all over town, and there's a wide variety of opinion on that. I think many of us in the political world are looking to our public health officials to provide guidance on how to approach the issue of using masks, whether they're medical masks or non-medical masks, particularly the issue of trying to ensure that the medical masks are preserved for the healthcare workers where they truly are needed and there is some level of shortage. And I see you're pulling up your homemade face mask there. But the use of non-medical face masks is, I believe, an important element of public health. When you're out and about and you're not able to physically distance as well as you might normally want to or be able to. For example, if you're out shopping, you're in a grocery store, or if you're on public transit or in some other location where you're going to be rubbing shoulders with other people that you don't know, having a face mask can certainly help support public health and reduce community transmission of COVID-19 because you're not spraying your respiratory droplets over other people. And vice versa, it may provide some level of protection to yourself.
Yeah, I've started wearing this where in public, even where I know I'm going to be able to maintain my distance, I'm wearing it more. I had to go to the bank yesterday, and even though they've got us spaced and everybody's got plastic shields, for the sake of the example, I wore my beautiful wheat sheaf fashion statement, and I'm trying to imagine an Oakville motif mask that we might all get behind. Maybe I should set up a contest, like with a real prize for the best Oakville design face covering.
It's certainly an issue that I think a lot of organizations are trying to figure out themselves. If you have staff, you could be providing face masks that have your company logo on them and that kind of thing. So that is becoming an issue. One thing we didn't talk about yet around face masks is the issue of those who can't wear face masks. And for example, those who might be asthmatic, they may have problems wearing face masks. So when you're out and about and you see somebody not wearing a face mask, there may actually be a good reason for it. It may not simply be that they're not willing to wear one. They may have actually contemplated the issue and realized that it's actually going to do them harm from a health perspective. And there are other people who shouldn't be wearing them. You shouldn't be putting them on your infants. Those under 2 years of age. It's not recommended that they wear a face mask.
Yeah, it's a tough one. We probably do have the authority to require it. Certainly, we would be able to require it to be on town property. But I've been taking the view that we do better when we do this by consent and we encourage good behavior. My sense of Canada is we don't really want to have a rule nanny standing over our shoulder for every single thing. So, I think as long as we continue to have good numbers in Oakville, I think there's a case for a light hand on the question of mask wearing. In other good news, we're now ready, willing, and able to hook people up with bags and gloves and anything else that they need for our traditional community cleanups, which have been delayed by about a month because of COVID. And so, Beth, have you got the email handy from Mark?
I do not, but I know that there are hours from 10 till 2, Monday till Friday, where you can get hold of them, and they will look after making sure that you can pick up the masks and gloves from outside of Town Hall, curbside pickup at Town Hall, and contact either your local counselor or the head of your organization that wants to do one. And I'm just looking to see if I can find.
Well, I gave the wrong name. It's Mike.Viles, Viles, at oakville.ca.
Oh, and there it is.
He'll take your order for gloves and bags, and we'll provide curbside or in-person pickup at Town Hall. And then we will also arrange for completing the cleanup by you contact him, and he'll arrange for what you collect to be picked up. So we're only, well, I guess it's only exactly 4 weeks, give or take, since Earth Day. So a belated happy Earth Day My thanks and the thanks of all of council to you if you and your neighbors would like to go out and resume our traditional community pickup. Now,
That's certainly been something that we've lost out on. You started off asking me what are people asking about. This is actually one of the things that people have asked about is what's with all the litter. And it's the same thing that we typically get this every spring, and it usually comes just about a week before our giant Earth Day cleanup all around town, which unfortunately this year had to be canceled.
Yeah.
And so when we go back now and we're starting the ability to do cleanups, we still need to make sure that people aren't having giant groups of people gathering to do these cleanups. That it ought to be done in very small groups, maintaining the 2-meter physical distancing.
Yeah, which is a great time for me to give a shout out to Shadow Commons in the northwest corner in Bronny Creek subdivision, because they did one before we were even doing this. They did it all with great safety along the trails, but the superintendent of the whole complex paid over $300 himself and took it to the dump and disposed of everything. So that was a great initiative from a very small group in Oakville. And I think that more people could do this in small groups and get a lot done.
yeah, that is outstanding. You know, and a month ago, we did have a number of valiant volunteers who went out and cleaned up a tremendous amount of litter. One gentleman all by himself did 40 bags, and we arranged to pick that up and take it to the dump for him. When he phoned up and said, "What do I do? I'm afraid to put it out for fear of being charged by the region for excess bags." And I said, "Bless you, we'll look after it." So, Councillor Adams, you've been following the numbers on COVID locally and in Halton. What's your sense of where we're going on cases? And I ask that as kind of a setup to talk about where we think we're going to go on testing.
That's a really good question, and it's one that I think a lot of people, when I walk around doing my daily walk, getting my daily exercise, it's often a question that comes up is, how are we doing? And the answer is, we're doing okay. We're not doing perfect, but we're not doing bad. We've got neighbors in Peel and Toronto who are in much worse situation than we are. Right now, we're averaging 5 or 6 cases a day. And that's not as good as we were before March break, for example, when we were, at the 0 or 1 a day kind of figure. But it's much better than we were in mid-April when we were seeing, 10 to 20 cases a day. So we've come down off of that peak, but we're still seeing cases. And so we need to continue to be vigilant, and we do need to be concerned about whether there might be community transmission coming from outside of the Oakville and Halton area, coming from Peel and Toronto, for example. If you happen to be a person who's working in one of those other communities, you are probably at a slightly higher risk of getting it and bringing it back than you might be getting it in the community transmission in Halton and Oakville. So that's an issue to be concerned about. So we need to continue tracing, we need to continue our case management and make sure that we're doing all those things.
Well, you raise an interesting point, because people going in and out of, leaving to go to work and coming home, that does speak to how there is a kind of mixing that does go on. For some reason, we've had a very low death level from this disease in Oakville. I think
we've had three deaths in Oakville. But there were a larger number of deaths up in Halton Hills associated with an institutional outbreak. And
right.
So like all across Canada, where a large portion of the deaths and fatalities have actually been occurring amongst long-term care facilities, those are the kinds of things that we need to be vigilant about. Recently, we've been doing okay on that front. Most of our recent cases are actually community transmission cases out and about, I'll say, even if they're associated with a family contact or something like that. They're not happening as egregiously as they were before in our long-term care facilities.
What do you make of the fact that our community transmission, our community spread, is lower than our neighbors' community spread?
It's an interesting question. And I think it's one that a lot of people are trying to figure out, and it's not just us. I think people all around the world are trying to figure out why does it happen in one place and not another. Part of it may be socioeconomic, where our community is better able to self-isolate. We're better able to stay at home. If you think about the kind of professionals that we have in our community, many of the people are working in jobs that could continue at home. They don't necessarily need to go into either a manufacturing setting or one where you're shoulder to shoulder with other people. And so in those cases, you're able to reduce your transmission a little bit.
So what's your sense of the low level of testing? The Premier has been fretting every day for many days, I've lost track of how many days, about how the province isn't delivering anything close to its capacity in testing. And the last couple of days he's been saying, please, everybody go get tested. What is it even possible for everybody to go get tested? Or are the test centers still screening you and saying you don't need a test, or like the soup Nazi on Seinfeld, no test for you?
No, well, earlier on during the pandemic, that was certainly the case. There was a much heavier level of screening in terms of who ought to be tested. And the message back then was not everybody needs to be tested. I still think that that's true, that not everybody needs to be tested. If you're a very low risk person, you're showing no symptoms, you have no reason to think that you might have come into contact with somebody, you probably don't need to be tested. But if you're in a position where you're in contact with other people, you think you may have come into contact, then maybe you have a reason to, because you might fear transmitting the virus to family or friends. And so things have changed. We also, Ontario have ramped up our ability to test. And if you look at some places like China, for example, where they're now endeavoring to test every citizen in Wuhan, for example, clearly it is possible to test a whole lot of people and do it very quickly. And so I think the province and our health units ought to continue to work to ramp up their ability.
Well, now, for almost 2 weeks, we've been opening back up, so to speak. The Premier set us in motion, and we have a number of things open already, and we have, I won't call it a few things still closed, I'll say we have other things that are still to come. Let's review for folks what's open, and let's talk about the things that are still to come and why they're still to come. So dog parks, check, right?
Working well. I've seen Shell Parks 3 days in the last week as I've gone to play pickleball, and the people have been great. There's a lot that come, but they stay far apart from each other. The dogs don't, but the people do. And I think that mainly they just have to be smart enough. You have a thing of hand sanitizer in your car when you get to it, and then you go straight home and you wash really good. But I really think that it's worked well, and people are so happy to have their dogs out again.
So smuggled into your remark there is the news that some of our racket courts are open. I think Trafalgar Park on Kerr and Rebecca, its courts I think are opening next week. And then we have 2 courts that are still being constructed, so they're obviously not open, but everything else is open. Tom, have you seen anybody out using the courts in your ward?
Yes, we've got some local courts that are now open, and they're regularly being used. I can tell you, my kids have been looking forward to being able to go and play tennis. And every time they've gone to go by the tennis courts, they've discovered that they're being used. So they're being used. And I also have received communications from some of our residents who were part of a tennis group, and they wanted to be able to go and start playing tennis again. And so there's certainly a lot of interest in being able to get out and enjoy the weather and use the courts.
Which is a good time as a reminder that in respect for each other, 30 minutes is, if there's a lineup for the courts, is how long you should play, and then get off so someone else gets the chance. Because the one thing we can't have is huge groups waiting for their time at the courts.
So it's like take turns and share and be nice.
And be nice.
Be nice.
Now, we had a lot of well-intentioned insistence from various people that we had to open community gardens, and we've got those open. How is the, do you actually visit your community gardens? Are they busy? What's happening with those?
I was there the day before yesterday at the one at Shell Park, and it was working great. There were about 3 or 4 people working in it. The park ambassador sits and makes sure that there are not more than 10. Shell Parks is the smallest, it gets 10. I think the one at Kingsford gets 15, and the one at Lions Lane gets 12. People in at one time. People were great. They were working in separate areas of it, and it's so nice to see them going again.
What's your sense of our community garden capacity? Is it adequate, insufficient, just right? I mean, is it enough or too little or too much?
There's a wait list, so I think we could probably have more. They give it till the end of June before they'll give up a spot that hasn't been tended. I would say in the next week or two, probably 80% will be going.
One question I've been, that's come my way is, why is a particular parking lot at a rec center still closed? And I may as well put the answer in here that if the rec centers are still closed by the Premier's order, and so the parking lots associated with just a rec center are closed as well. Parking lots, though, for parks are open. What about our green spaces? Tom, as I understand it, there's a trail near your house that's much trod by the Adams family.
That is correct. And our trails have been open the entire time, and our parks have been open for people to go through to get to our trails the entire time. Our open spaces in our parks are now open and available for people to go and use on a casual basis. So if you want to go and kick a ball around or throw a frisbee around, you're allowed to go and do that with your family. You're not allowed to go and get your highly disciplined soccer team out and start training as a group. That's still not allowed using our sports fields, but you can go and enjoy the space now, which you weren't allowed to do previously. One thing that you mentioned was Premier's orders, and we ought to reinforce in people's minds that many of the orders, many of the closures that we are encountering right now are on the order of the province. It's not a local decision. We're following out the orders given to us by the province, not the other way around.
Yeah, Canada is a crown system of government. I never seem to be able to avoid the necessity of explaining how government in Canada works, and it's very top down. And the town is the bottom of a 4-layer cake. We get the orders from above, and we're the enforcement level in many ways. So I do get notes from residents wanting us to be rebels, but that's not the Canadian way, I don't think. I want to take a second to pass along my mom's advice about picnic tables and benches. My mom is no longer with us, but when we would go anywhere as a family in the old-timey days before any of this, she would always clean the picnic table before we sat down to use it. And I hope that people get it, that it's up to the user to clean the surface that you're about to use. You do not live in a mansion with servants who will be standing by waiting to clean it off for you before you use it. But keeping the surfaces clean around you is a good thing, and washing your hands is a good thing too. We just got guidance from the medical officer of health on what's required to open public washrooms. Tom and Beth, did you see that? Do you want to talk about that?
I'm not sure if I'm the perfect janitorial staff to describe all of that, but it comes down to, it's a lot more complicated than it used to be to open a bathroom. Things like ensuring that where you can, you keep the door open to the bathroom, that you make sure that there's proper sanitizer, that you've got to be extra vigilant about making sure there's soap in the dispensers, those kinds of things.
Yeah,
So
so we have those sort of don't open it unless you can do those things, guidance from the medical officer of health. But in the same spirit as what I just said about picnic tables, lessons from my mom, clean up for yourself and after yourself is my mom's advice on these things. And so, just
And the
because
reality right now, without our student program going and with less staff than we usually have, the protocols take more staff. So in doing cleanups 2 or 3 times a day from the town, it's a difficult piece to make it so we can reopen them.
So one more bit of good news, basketball courts should be open next week. And as for the rec centers and the playgrounds and their equipment, we await the permission of the Premier. I wonder, what else do you think we need to look at today?
Well, there's been discussion about things like timing of being able to have libraries open for pickup service. And that's certainly something that municipalities all across Ontario are looking at in terms of what are the protocols required to allow that to happen. I
think we're expecting to achieve those in the first part of June. So I guess one way to sum up is, for a couple of weeks now, we've been in an opening up mode. As long as the numbers stay good, we're told by the powers that be, that would be the Premier and the Prime Minister, that will continue. I know that in Toronto today, they were talking in a distressed kind of way that the numbers are peaking and making them regret opening. But remember what we said when we started this. We did these restrictions in the name of increasing our healthcare system's capacity. That has been accomplished. We now have the capacity to be able to face the virus. So, there very well may be an increased number of cases, but as long as it stays within our capacity, we will have achieved our goal. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And if there's anything that you'd like to be discussed on Oakville Matters, you can send that to me, mayor@oakville.ca. Until then, we'll see you next time, and thanks for watching.